You should watch this at night.
Hello there, bitch. I'm going to tell you in detail why you have been kidnapped, what's going to happen to you.
Hey curious cats, my name is Sahara. Welcome to the True Crime channel. Let's get into it. As you guessed from the title, tonight we're going to be talking about the toy box killer, aka David Scooter. David Parker Ray. David was born on November the 6th, 1939 in New Mexico. He has a younger sister named Peggy. What we know about David from his childhood is that he was extremely shy, he was introverted, and he used to be the target of bullies at school. When David was 10 years old, his father abandoned the family, but he would visit on occasions. His father is known to be an alcoholic. He's also very violent, both with Peggy and David and also his wife when they were still together. When the parents split up, it was decided that David and Peggy would live with their grandfather on their mother's side. So the mother at some point also decided to abandon the family. I don't really know why, I couldn't find the information. And the grandfather was said to be a very religious person who would sometimes be, well, very strict, and he would discipline both Peggy and David. When David's father would sometimes visit, this is disturbing, he would give his own son porn magazines and especially SM. That caused David from a very young age to have sexual fantasies about rough sex, very violent sex, but also torture and rape. One day when they were both teenagers, his sister found his magazines, and I'm guessing she must have been shocked, because it was not just magazines about, bondage and SM and stuff like that. It was also drawings made by David, very disturbing drawings. And keep in mind that this is the 50s, 60s, so it's probably even more disturbing at the time for her. David served in the army as a mechanic after he finished high school, after he graduated. He was discharged. I don't know when or why exactly, but he was discharged. He kept working as a mechanic, just not for the military. He got married 4 times, 4 failed marriages. They all ended up in a divorce, and with 2 of his ex-wives, he had 2 children, and with one of his children, he was very close, and her name was Glenda Jean Ray, and she goes by the name Jessie. Cynthia Hendy, or Cindy, she goes by Cindy. She was born in 1969. She grew up in the state of Washington. She was raised by an alcoholic mother who would sometimes forget to feed her children. She was dating a very violent, physically violent man, so maybe that's why she would let her kids starve. I don't know, go figure. She eventually got rid of this physically abusive man when Cindy was 8. She met another man, they got married, and it turns out this new guy was even more charming than the other one. What I mean by that is that one night when Cindy was 11, he came home, he went into her bed, and he raped her. When Cindy told her mother confronted her husband about it. And he said, sorry, I was too drunk. I mistook her bed for our bed. Sorry. This incident got Cindy kicked out of her own home when she was only 12 years old because her mother chose her husband over her own daughter. It's not that she didn't believe her, because obviously it was true. She knew it was true because he had admitted it. She just made the choice to stay with her husband and have her daughter, that maybe she saw as a rival, just leave the house. At that point, Cindy started selling her body for money. She started dating drug dealers, and then she started using drugs herself. And like her mother, she became an alcoholic. And kind of like David, Cindy also enjoyed rough sex. I mean, definitely not as rough as David, but she was into rough sex as well. Like, she was into a little bit of violence in the bedroom, which is okay, but she was also in the rape fantasy, and not in the rape fantasy as in, role playing, and she would, um, I mean, sorry, I just think it's messed up to pretend as a woman, in the bedroom with your boyfriend or husband or whatever, that you're being raped. I don't know, I just take rape very seriously. She was not into that kind of rape fantasy. She was into the raping someone else fantasy. She suggested to a former boyfriend, and some articles say multiple boyfriends, that they should rape somebody together. I mean, when I go on a date with a guy, I like, movie, dinner. That's just me. Moving on. Cindy never married, but she had different partners throughout her life, and she became a mother herself. She had 3 children, and just like her own mother, and just like David's parents, she gave up her children to their grandmother. In an attempt to elude justice for crimes that she committed in the state of Washington, Cindy decided to move to New Mexico in a town called Truth or Consequences. When I first found out that the USA has cities like Paris in Texas, London in Ohio, and Naples in Florida, I was like, get your own city name. Stop stealing from Europe. Stop stealing from us. But I get it now. I get it. When Cindy moved to New Mexico in 1997, she started working in Elephant Butte State Park. Elephant Butte is a town located right next to Truth or Consequences. David was working in that same park, so when they met, you can imagine how quickly they bonded over their shared preferences. Apparently, Cindy had never acted on her sexual fantasies until she met David. And it was mostly because he had started telling her about things he had done in the past, like the fact that when he was a teenager, he kidnapped a girl, he tied her to a tree, and he raped her. But then he also killed her and disposed of her body, and nobody ever found her. He told her that, and she was okay with it. She even moved in with him. What do you look for in a man? Like when you're trying to date someone, like when you want to date someone, what do you look for? Personally, I like them smart, I like them nice, I like them respectful, a little bit crazy, because I am crazy, but like cute crazy. Cindy likes him real crazy. David told Cindy not only that he had killed and raped this woman when he was a teenager, but he also confessed having killed many other women since he was actually 15 years old, 1 per year. He explained that to get rid of the bodies, he would open the guts, scoop everything out, fill the belly with rocks or concrete, and then dump the bodies in the lake in Elephant Butte. And listen to what Cindy has to say to these confessions.
When I moved in, he started to tell me all the women that he had murdered. He said at least one a year for about 40 years.
What then was your reaction?
Made me nervous.
Why nervous?
Well, wouldn't it make you nervous? I mean, that's natural. You'd be nervous too. But it also interested me because I felt I was getting to know a serial killer. I'd never met one, and I was just curious.
She was curious. If you meet someone who says, I'm a serial killer, don't move in with them. Call the police. Because they had similar sexual fantasies, Cindy could finally rape somebody, act on her fantasies. With her boyfriend, she had been dreaming about that for a while now. And she finally found a boyfriend who wanted the exact same thing and more, much, much, much more. One day, David purchased a soundproof trailer that he equipped, probably with the help of Cindy, I suppose, with all sorts of objects. He spent a total of $100,000 on it, and here's what you could find inside: a gynecologist chair. How did he get that? Where did he get that? Theory coming soon. Sex toys that he built himself with his creativity. Some were derived from actual sex toys, and some were just objects that he was going to use as sex toys. You could also find handcuffs, straps, gags, chains, belts, whips, anatomy books, medical devices like surgical instruments, syringes, gloves, very, very, very large dildos, a camera so he could make his own movies, iron bars with writings on them, ankle spreader, knee spreader, and on the ceiling there was a mirror so the person sitting in the chair could see everything that was going to be done to them. He called his objects of torture his friends, maybe because he could control them and use them to inflict pain and suffering in others, the exact opposite of what a friend does. Maybe it was a twisted way to get revenge from being bullied at school by people who could have been his friends instead of being, well, his enemies, I guess. I don't know. There were pictures of bondage and also porn material, along with very colorful drawings made by David on the walls. He also had diagrams on different ways to inflict pain and a poster that read, if they're worth taking, they're worth keeping. He also had notes on the wall, kind of like checklists of basically 3 different things. One of them was for himself, like what he was supposed to do. Like, for example, a rule that he had for himself was that he would tell his victims everything that he was going to be doing to them, and that was in order to prevent them from thinking too much, whatever that means. I didn't really get it. He felt like it was a way of controlling them and controlling their thoughts. Another note was for his accomplices and what they were to do. And the third one was about the victims, a sort of reminder that they were to be abused physically and verbally. They had to wear a collar and a blindfold at all times. Their legs were to be spread as wide as possible. They would receive electrical shocks to their breasts and other sensitive parts of their bodies. They shouldn't be trusted when they spoke because they would probably try to talk their way out of the toy box. And there was a coffin inside the toy box for some reason. They were to be placed in it at times for whatever reason. Prepare them for death, create fear, I don't know. Whenever a new victim was brought to the toy box, Ray eventually got tired of repeating that speech that he would always give them on what was going to happen to them. So he made an audio tape. He's very organized. A transcript of the tape can be found online. I'm just going to quote a few lines because it's very long and some parts are just very graphic, but this is just to give you an idea. Before I get into the tape, you should know that usually the way David and Cindy proceeded to get victims is they would go actually to the same place like over and over. It's a wonder that nobody picked up on it. They would go to the Blue Water Saloon in Elephant Butte because, yeah, he's lazy and he just gets his victims from his hometown. But apparently, it's a town where there's a lot of drifters, a lot of people who just, are passing through this town and they're not staying, they're not locals. So, I don't know, apparently it was a good spot. So, they would go into the saloon, they would wait for a potential victim to show up. The victim would be drugged, usually by putting something in her drink when she's looking the other way. Then she would be brought to the toy box, she would be tied to the chair, and David would just sit there and wait for her to wake up. At which point he would play the tape. It starts with, "Hello there, bitch. Listen to this tape because it's very relevant to your situation. I'm going to tell you in detail why you have been kidnapped, what's going to be done to you, and how long you'll be here." Imagine waking up to that. "Our primary interest is what's between your legs. You'll be raped repeatedly and thoroughly. You've been snatched for us to train and use as a sex slave. You're going to be kept naked and chained like an animal. My lady friend and I have been keeping sex slaves for years." He just goes into very disgusting details on many more things that he's going to do to them. He specifies that the trailer is soundproof, so there's no point in screaming, and this town is in the middle of the desert. It's in the middle of nowhere, so even if the victim screams, nobody's gonna hear her. He admits in the tape that he's been raping bitches ever since I was old enough to masturbate. I mean, he didn't say masturbate, I'm just not comfortable phrasing it the way he did. I need to stop talking about cases involving sex because it's been 3 in a row. Next case is going to be about money or something. In the recording, he goes on explaining that the victim is going to be kept clean, allowed to use the bathroom, be watered and fed, but fed just enough to keep them alive. Oh gee, thank you, sir. He says that he's going to use the sex toys. He explains how he's going to do that. He also says that he's into anal sex a lot. He's very fond of it because he's into animal sex. The transcript is very long and very, very graphic. I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm not even mentioning here. At first, I didn't want to read the whole thing. Like, I was getting to some parts and I was like, no, it's just like, it's stuff that you can't even conceive of. I think as a woman, I felt even more disgusted by it because I can't help imagine myself in this situation. I think I mentioned it in one of my previous videos, but there was this interesting article that says that a lot of people who watch true crime are actually women. It's kind of educational for us. You're like imagining yourself in the situation and you're thinking, what would I do if I was a victim? What would I do if I was her? Females are just more likely to be a victim, so it just makes sense. When I was researching this case, the fact that David and Cindy would go to bars and drug women when they were looking the other way. It reminded me of my time as a flight attendant. And that's something that each airline that I worked for told us to be, very wary of. When you're on a layover, they tell you that like, you can party, you can go out for drinks, you can meet people, you can do whatever you want, but just get your drink yourself, from the bar or whatever, and just keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on your drink. A colleague of mine once told me that he was on a layover somewhere and he was in his hotel room and one of his colleagues called him and she was crying. So he's like, what's going on? And she tells him that she just woke up in a room with 5 guys next to her. Like some are in the bed next to her and some are like on the floor. Like there's just, 5 guys surrounding her. She's pretty much naked and she has no idea what happened. And the last thing that she remembered was being in a bar and drinking, meeting people and having a couple drinks with them. Let's go back to the tape. David also says in this recording that he's gonna drug the victim and hypnotize them so they don't remember anything, and especially not the location of the trailer. I'm not sure how good he was at hypnotizing people. That obviously didn't work. The drugs did though. If everybody knew how much fun it was to have a sex slave, half the women in this world would be chained up in someone's basement. What do you want to say to that? He doesn't always keep the victims in the playroom, toy box. Sometimes he calls it the playroom. At times they're taken inside the house because when he has friends over, he likes to share. And this here, the fact that sometimes the victims are kept inside the house, this will play a huge part in the unfolding of events. So keep that in mind. So David's recording confirms that he has friends that come over to his house and are aware of the situation. So it's not just him and Cindy, it's also other people. He doesn't give any names, other people who participate in the torturing and raping of these female victims. In the tape, he specifies that these friends are mostly into regular stuff. So like in the recording, he's telling the victim, like, don't worry too much about my friends. The most fucked up stuff that you're going to be going through is, what I'm into. Oh, gee, thank you, sir. Is that supposed to be reassuring? He talks about punishment if the victim doesn't follow the strict rules, and also if they bite or scratch or kick and try to escape. He says that if the victim causes too much trouble, he has no problem slicing her throat. He says he doesn't like killing, but occasionally it happens. He causes pain, but not suffering, and he says there's a big difference. He doesn't want to cause serious or permanent damage. Your vagina, he doesn't use the word vagina, but he says your vagina is designed to have a baby come out of it, so we will never use anything bigger than that. Oh, gee, thank you, sir. In many of the things that the slave will have to do or will have to go through, it's not just for David and his friends, it's also, this is disturbing, but it's also for his dogs. There's like a whole paragraph about the dogs raping these female victims, and it was just so disturbing. And of course, as I said, he mentions Cindy. He doesn't say her name. He says mistress or lady or my lady friend. He doesn't give her name, but we know it's who he means, right? And organized as David was, he would even, this is really fucked up, this is really messed up. David even had a sort of form that he would fill out, a sort of questionnaire, a list of questions that he would ask his victims, and he would just, write everything down. The questions were about sexual preferences, medical conditions, if they were on any medication, their period date, if they ever gave birth to a baby. The tape ends with, be smart and a survivor, don't ever scream, don't talk without permission, be very quiet, be docile and obedient, and by all means show proper respect. Is he seriously talking about respect? This is what happened on March the 22nd, 1999. A woman by the name of Cynthia, 22 years old, from Albuquerque, was held captive by David and Cindy. On that day, she was not in the toy box, she was inside the house. Cindy was on her cell phone, she was talking to a friend, she was a little bit distracted. I think David was running some errands or something, he was not home. And Cynthia, the victim, was on the bed, she was chained up, and she notices that the keys to her handcuffs are on the table next to her. She grabs them and she sets herself free, and she gets the phone and she calls 911. But Cindy hears her, so she hangs up her cell, she gets to Cynthia, and she hangs up the 911 call. Exactly what happened to Junko Furuta. There's a struggle. Cindy throws a lamp at Cynthia. She hits her on the head and injures her. Cynthia starts bleeding and she's defending herself as well as she can. She's trying to get a hold of, anything that's laying around, and she finds an ice pick. She attacks Cindy with it. So Cindy's backing off, and this gives the opportunity for Cynthia to run away, to escape. She's naked, she's injured, she's terrified that Cindy's gonna catch up to her or that David is gonna come back home any second. She just runs for it. She runs as fast as she can. She has no idea where she is. She manages to get to the road and she starts waving at cars who are passing by. Nobody stops to help her. Then she sees an RV. I mean, there were a couple of them. One had the door open. She rushes in and she closes the door behind her. Inside the mobile home, there's a woman watching TV, and she's obviously very surprised to see this woman naked, covered in blood and bruises, come inside. Cynthia starts to beg this woman for help. She tries to explain the situation, and this woman helps her. She gives her clothes and she calls 911. So Cynthia takes over the phone call and she tells the police what happened to her. She says, I'm alive, I'm alive. Like, she's just so happy, relieved, and surprised that she's alive. So she keeps repeating, I'm alive, I'm alive. She explains the situation, and she sort of gives the location of the house, like what she remembers from, running away from it. And they tell her, we actually already have someone on the scene because we received a phone call that was interrupted. So we just wanted to make sure everything was okay, and we sent a team there. Cynthia is taken to hospital where they take care of her wounds and injuries after taking pictures because they will be used as evidence. When the police asks her how she was abducted, she admits that she is a prostitute and she met David on the job. He was driving around in his trailer. I think he was in Albuquerque because from what I read, I remember that she said she was surprised that she was in Elephant Butte, which was about 150 miles away from Albuquerque. And well, I just read that she was surprised that she was there, so I'm guessing that this one victim, David actually picked up from Albuquerque, not from Elephant Butte, which he was used to doing. So he's in his trailer, and Cindy is also inside, and they see Cynthia. She's a prostitute, so she's offering her services to David. Once she gets inside the trailer, he shows her a fake badge. He pretends that he's a police officer and she's under arrest for solicitation. But at that point, they start gagging her and tying her wrists. So Cynthia understands that they definitely are not police officers, but it's too late. So when I tell you that David is organized, he is organized. He prepared himself and Cindy for the possibility of being arrested by police if somehow one victim managed to escape. When they're taken into police custody, because of course they're arrested after what Cynthia told them, both of them will say the exact same thing, that Cynthia is a friend with a very bad heroin addiction and they were just helping her get clean. The fact that David has no criminal record and the fact that Cynthia has admitted to being a prostitute, well, it helps David, but it doesn't help Cynthia, because everything she's talking about, the raping and torturing and the crazy sex fantasies, it could all have been consensual. But police still wanted to really look into this because it just sounded so weird, and they got a warrant to search David's house. At first, they check the inside of the house, and there are signs of struggle. There's a little blood, and I mean, you can see from the picture there are obvious signs of struggle. And outside the house is the toy box, the trailer. Imagine their surprise and shock when they enter the toy box and they find everything that Cynthia has described to them. David's toys, David's friends. They found the very incriminating audio tape, and they found one videotape. In this tape, you can see a woman being supposedly raped. You can tell that she's either, high or drunk, but you can definitely tell that she's completely out of it. At that point, everything they found, in the house and the toy box and Cynthia's statement were enough to charge David and Cindy with 12 counts, including kidnapping and torture. The issue was the police worried that maybe there would not be enough evidence to send him to prison for the rest of his life. Because even though you can see in the pictures, they found a lot of pictures and one videotape, the women were, in the pictures, the women were, gagged and bound and all sorts of, horrible stuff. You could not prove that it was not consensual. And on top of that, they know that the fact that Cynthia is a prostitute is definitely not going to help the case in court. So they try to find the woman in the videotape, and they were also desperate for other women to come forth and possibly tell the same story as Cynthia, which would definitely help the case, if they had more testimonies. The only thing they had to identify the woman from the tape was a tattoo that she had on her leg. It was a pretty, specific tattoo. It was quite unique, and they were hoping that through the media, this woman would, recognize herself and contact police. And while they're hoping that this tattooed woman will contact them, they receive a phone call from another one named Angelica. Angelica, would you believe, is actually Cindy's friend. So I think she lives in the same town. And one day she went to their house. I think she wanted some, milk or sugar or something like that from friendly neighbors. And when she got in, they threatened her, and Cindy had a gun to her head, and David was, I think he's the one who was, tying her up, and they took her to the trailer. They kept her for a few days, and she was able to talk her way out of it. She had reported it to the police probably as soon as she got out, but there was no follow-up for some reason. They had just taken her statement, and that was that. And I also have a theory about that, and it will come very soon. And thanks to Angelica's statement, the authorities had now the possibility to add 13 more counts to Cindy and David. So now it's 25. Let's talk about David's team. David and co. Of course, there was Cynthia, Hendy. From the tape, from the audio recording, we know that not only did she, help snatch victims, snatch women, but she also participated in the torture and rape and everything. I didn't want to mention these details, but, when David talks about everything that's going to be done to the victims, he also mentions what they have to do for Cindy, and he talks about oral sex and whatever. Like, he goes into horrific details, so I just didn't want to mention it. I mean, it's definitely there, it's definitely in the audio tape. And remember Jessie, David's daughter, she also provided her father with a victim, her friend Kelly, exactly like Cindy provided Angelica, and Jessie provided Kelly. And Kelly, turns out, is none other than the woman with the tattoo. These women have a very twisted definition of friendship. We don't know exactly how many women in total Cindy and Jessie provided to David. I don't like the word provided, because I guess you could say that for Jessie. I mean, there's no proof of anything else. There's no proof that she participated in anything. But Cindy did more than just provide. So as I was saying, Kelly is the woman with the tattoo. She recognized it. I think it was on the news, so she contacted police and she told them what happened. One night she had a fight with her husband, and she decided to, go out, have a couple drinks. She met with her friend Jessie. They have just one drink. While she's looking away, Jessie puts something in her drink. She spikes her drink, and next thing she knows, it's 3 days later. She has absolutely no idea what happened during those 3 days. After she woke up, she tried to go back home, to her husband, but he thought she had been cheating on him during those 3 days that she wasn't home, and they ended up getting a divorce over this. I don't know exactly how long, it was between the moment that she was abducted and when this, like, the arrest and everything was happening, and when she contacted the police. But during this, time frame, Kelly was having nightmares of horrible stuff being done to her, and she just thought it was nightmares. She didn't for a second believe that it was, flashes from what happened. The police showed her the videotape. She lost her husband, she lost her family over this. Cindy's involvement in this was also confirmed by Cynthia. You remember the victim that was able to escape, the reason why the police was able to put a stop to everything. And she said she remembered that Cindy was definitely participating. She did a lot of, just watching and just like being there, but she definitely participated in torturing and raping at least her. Cindy very quickly turned on David. She told police, everything that she could remember, probably hiding the fact that she was an active participant. She admitted, being there and witnessing it, but she denied bringing people in, snatching women, and, raping and torturing. It is reported that she told a friend that the whole thing gave her an adrenaline rush. She told that same friend that she witnessed 4 to 6 murders. And she either witnessed or was aware of these bodies being dumped in the lake, in the state park lake. The police was never able to find bodies. Of course, they searched David's property, they searched the state park where he works, they eventually searched the lake, but they waited 2011. I think it's because they found human bones. They waited to actually find human bones like they're close to the lake to search for, like, to search it. They did search the area, they did search the park, they didn't find anything, but they didn't search like inside the lake until they found those bones, which doesn't make any sense. But so Cynthia confirms Cindy's involvement, Cindy confirms Jesse's involvement, and she also gives another name, Dennis Roy Yancey. Obviously, this guy is questioned by police because not only did Cindy accuse him of participating in everything they were doing, she also accused him of murder, of the murder of Marie Parker, aged, I think, 22. And she, at that time, she was a missing person. But Cindy told them that he killed her. When Dennis is being interrogated, at first he says, I don't know Marie Parker, I don't know who that person is. And then it's revealed that she's actually his ex-girlfriend. The investigation reveals that. So they're like, you do know her, she's your ex-girlfriend, so just, tell us the truth. So he changes his story and he says, okay, here's what happened. One night, Marie was at the bar with David and Cindy. I think it was Cindy. They drugged her, they spiked her drink, as usual. They bring her, drugged and out of it. They bring her to the car and she, gets in the back seat with Dennis. They take this woman to the toy box. I don't know if Dennis participated. I don't think he admitted to that, but he said he was there. He witnessed it. After 3 days, they called him. They called Dennis. David and Cindy called Dennis, and they told him, we're done with her. Come back. So he goes back to the house or the trailer, the toy box or whatever, and they give him a rope and they tell him to strangle her. And he does it. He says that the reason he did it was because he was afraid of David. He was afraid that he would kill him, and supposedly he threatened him. Dennis takes the police to the place where supposedly he buried the body. He got rid of the body, but they don't find anything. It's speculated that either Dennis didn't remember correctly or David came back later and he took the body and he just moved it to somewhere else. There were also other speculations regarding people from the community, like local people from the town of Elephant Butte and maybe Truth or Consequences. Mainly it's because David talks about his friends sharing the victims with his friends in the audio tape. It's also, I'm guessing, this is my theory, but I'm guessing it's also because, the police report from Angelica had no follow-up. Some police officers in Elephant Butte were maybe involved in this motorcycle. I'm so sorry. Scooter. It's actually a scooter, which is much less sexy. And my silly theory about the gynecologist chair is that maybe a doctor was involved and maybe he provided the chair. I don't know. It's just what I was thinking when I was reading all of that, How do you get your hands on a gynecologist chair? It's crazy. I don't know. What do you think? Dennis Roy Yancey was sentenced to 15 years in prison for second-degree murder and another 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder. He was released in 2011 and he still lives in Elephant Butte. Cindy was sentenced to 36 years for being an accessory and for conspiracy. She had her sentence reduced because she got a plea deal in exchange of her testimony against David. She was released after serving only half her sentence. For David, it was decided that he would be tried separately for Cynthia, Angelica, and Kelly. Angelica, sadly, she died. She became a drug addict after the whole thing, after everything. So I think she had an overdose. She died of an overdose. So there was no trial for Angelica. I don't think it's fair. I mean, they still had her, testimonies and, the police reports and everything. I think they still should have gone through the trial. I mean, it's probably not possible. I get that it's not possible, but it should have been. I don't know. For the trial of Cynthia, Ray received a sentence of 224 years. He had accepted a plea bargain to get Jessie, his daughter, out of prison, or at least get her a lenient sentence. Jessie was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison and 5 years of probation, and she was released in 2001. Cindy, Dennis, and Jessie are roaming free today as we speak, as I speak, as you're watching this. Voila. But the worst is yet to come. David died of a heart attack. He didn't serve his sentence. During the trial, Cynthia kept saying that she didn't want the death penalty because it would be too easy and it would be, showing him mercy. She wanted him to spend the rest of his life in prison, so I'm guessing that she must have been very frustrated with the fact that he died. On the other hand, I think that maybe God called him because he was like, you have a private suite in hell and it just cannot wait. That's what I like to tell myself so I can sleep better at night with the idea that some of these monsters actually eluded the justice of men. I was just thinking about the fact that maybe David had, deep hatred towards women because of his mother abandoning him and because of girls from school ignoring him and him being shy, very shy with them. I don't know, it was just a theory. And just as an FYI, David was diagnosed with paraphilia. Paraphilia used to be called sexual deviation or sexual perversion. It's when people are aroused by atypical sexual practices or by something atypical, like an object, a situation, or a particular fantasy that is out of the ordinary. What is considered out of the ordinary, you'll ask me? Because there are some unusual practices that are not considered paraphilic. There are definitely, some gray areas when it comes to paraphilia, but I think we can say for sure, I mean, he was diagnosed with paraphilia anyway, so it's just so obvious that he was, I don't want to say suffering from that because I don't think it's something you suffer from, but he was just paraphilic. I just want to give you an example of paraphilic behavior because that one was, I think, funny. It's rare, but I thought it was funny. In a study that was made on paraphilia, one subject had a thing for sneezing. Not just other people sneezing, even when he would sneeze himself. He would just be sexually aroused. I'm not judging. I just thought it was funny. I don't actually know if that person, if that study subject was a man or a woman, but come on, let's be serious. It was probably a guy. Women are normal, except Cindy and Jessie. And just one last thing about paraphilia. There are actually 3 levels. There's optional, preferred, and exclusive. So optional is when the person can have it or not, like it doesn't really matter. Preferred is when it's preferred, but it's okay if they have normal sex. Exclusive is probably David, like it's the only thing that makes them happy. Can I phrase it like that? Oh, gets them going, I guess. I can phrase it like that. Time for the random item review. And tonight I want to talk about my chair. It is gorgeous. If you don't like pink and white like me, you can find it in different colors. I bought it on Amazon. I purchased it on December and it was delivered, I think it took like about a month, which is pretty unusual for Amazon. But I was happy to wait because this is probably one of the best purchases I have made in the year 2020. It is a gaming chair, but I mean, it can serve as a, desk chair, work chair, whatever. I use it when I'm on my desk and when I'm working on my computer and researching, psychos for my videos. I obviously also use it when I'm playing video games, and I usually will use this head cushion, and it has like a sort of, lower back cushion that massages you. You just plug it in. It's a USB port. You just plug it in and then you just turn it on. It cost me 180 euros, so that's I think about $200, 210 maybe. I think the feature I like the most about the chair is besides my ass being super comfortable. Yes, my ass is super happy right now, but also my elbows, because I have my microphone right here and I know that I've been having some sound issues in some of my earlier videos because I was resting my elbows on the desk and it's where my microphone is, so it would sometimes create noise, and I was just not aware of it because when you're filming you don't hear it. So yeah, I just didn't know. So yeah, now I'm not gonna have any sound issues, hopefully. Thank you for watching till the end. This one was disturbing. I'll talk about something that doesn't involve sex for sure, because it was just a lot to do, like 3 in a row. I didn't think it would upset me this much, but it did. So next one is not going to be about sex, I promise. Just for your sake and for my sake, okay? Let's stay sane. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon. Bye.